Today's speaker is Derek Kindle, who was named the Director of the Office of Student Financial Aid at UW-Madison in 2016. In this role, he's responsible for the university's administration of $478 million in federal, state, institutional, and private aid. He will discuss the various aspects of the national debate on financing of higher education in our country today, and then apply it to that scenario here at UW-Madison. Derek, we look forward to your presentation, and we have made a contribution to the Rotary International Polio Plus Foundation as a way of saying thanks for speaking to us today. As I welcome Derek to the podium, I want to remind you if time permits for questions, I'll be out in the audience with a microphone, so please wait till I arrive as our program is being recorded. Welcome, Derek.
Good afternoon. It's so great to see many of you, and some of you have so many UW connections and connections all throughout Madison. So it's good to be here when it's not so cold outside, and good to see you all after you've eaten, hopefully. The first thing I want to do, and I saw the four-way test here, is it the truth? I wanted to talk about some of the perceptions of higher ed. So here we go. Or here we go. So quotes about higher education we say are something like the weather in Madison. Just wait a day and they'll change. And I'll give you some examples, right? Here we go. So contrary to what everyone thinks, college costs less these days. This is Forbes magazine in March of this year. And just 3 months later, price of college increasing almost 8 times faster than wages, Forbes magazine. Here we go. College may not be worth it anymore. New York Times. That's in May. A month prior to that. It's hard to quantify the full value of education, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics say that in terms of dollars, education makes sense. The student loan debt crisis is about to get worse. Bloomberg, October. Between 2012 and 2016, the typical debt burden for a new college graduate barely increased at all. Forbes. Just a couple months earlier than that, 5 months earlier. The default problem is worse than thought inside higher ed. And then this is from the American Enterprise Institute that basically said 70% of borrowers bring their federal loans back out of default within 5 years. Another one, the spiraling cost of a student loan relief program. This is about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a nice headline from CNBC. Just 96 of the 30,000 people who applied for a public service loan forgiveness actually got it. All right, so you can see there are lots of confusing things, and everyone chooses what they want to believe depending on what month, what day, which news source. We'll go back to, is it the truth? Being part of the four-way test here at Rotary, right? So from a financial aid perspective, when we talk about costs, we talk about it in a very different way. There's what we call a sticker price, which is what we tell students and their families, this is how much it costs. And for grandparents who are hearing about costs, for parents who are hearing about costs, they might say, when I went to UW-Madison, it's $424, and I worked my way, and everything was fine, and I saved up my pennies, and I went to school with just a satchel and some snowshoes, and everything was fine. And then the grandkid or the kid comes home and says, it's about $26,000 a year, and over 4 years, about $100,000. And God forbid it's a non-resident, it's about twice that amount. And everyone gets really crazy about the cost of college, right? There's some truth to that. But then there's also what we call the net price, right? So our job is to help students and families afford their education in any way that we can. And that's a combination of sources. It's a combination of methodologies that we use as financial aid administrators. I'm happy to have in front of me Kimani. You can see he's sitting dead set in front of me. This is my counterpart from Madison College. So I have to make sure that I keep it true and accurate for Kimani. All right, so what we look at is the sticker price. This is UW-Madison figure, so $26,000, for example. There's gift aid. Gift aid is anything that you don't have to repay, so it could be a scholarship, it could be a grant. Never ask a financial aid person what's the difference between a scholarship and a grant, because we actually don't care. It's something that you don't have to repay. That's the short answer. Self-help, that includes loans, So those are loans, whether they be from the federal government, whether they be private loans. These are not necessarily the loans that you're getting from family and friends. And then there's work study, a big part of it, right? That equals the actual cost. So once a student completes the FAFSA, which was available on October 1st, we're about 30 days, 31 days into that filing, then we as financial aid administrators put together a financial aid package to take that $26,000 down to whatever we find that we have the resources for and is reasonable for a student and their family. I'm saying reasonable for a student and their family as it applies to our resources and as it applies to that. So please don't attack us if you find that the cost is not reasonable. Madison College, Kimani will answer all of those questions after the presentation. Please be sure to get them. So we do know that college costs are rising, so that's true, right? First thing, is it true? It is true. College costs are rising. It's undeniable. You can see there the chart from 97 to about last year. You'll see at the bottom the net tuition. That's the tuition, again, after sticker price. There, it's pretty much leveling off. There's a slight increase, but then the other costs associated with college has gone up. You can see the second line, the second solid line from the bottom is the published tuition and fees, which you can see going up. And then you can see the additional cost, so that's tuition, fees, room, and meals, or board. Looks like it's skyrocketing, right? Up there at the $20,000 mark. But at the same time, we can see state support for higher education is on a steep decline. These are not dollars, these are the percentages that state support has decreased. This is not specific to Wisconsin, this is state support overall. This does not necessarily mean state scholarships and grants to students. This is the total funding, state support to their public institutions. And so you can see that figure going down. There's some increase in the last few years from 2012 to 2014, depending on the state, of course, that might change. But in general, it's gone down significantly. So when you did pay your $400 or your $700 when you attended college, it's at a time typically when there was a lot of state support and there weren't some other costs that are now associated with going to college. Where you live matters, of course, for tuition and fees. Wisconsin is there with the arrow. You can see the median about $99.80. This is actually just tuition for a resident student. If you're in New Hampshire, it's a whole lot more expensive. And if you're in Wyoming, it's a whole lot less expensive as a state. So where you live matters, particularly if you're going to a public institution. You can see here how we quantify the value of a degree and dollars and cents wise, right? So if you're talking about leading to a career, how much over your lifetime might you stand to earn based on the credential that you receive? High school diploma, you can see there is at the bottom. The biggest part is between $30,000. If we look at the bachelor's degree, have the highest, second highest, of course, of the earnings, and an advanced degree, whether that's a professional degree. So this is still about the age 35, what you could expect to earn based on that. So we still know that there is value in higher education. Probably don't have to sell it too much to this room, but it is a question. Is education a public good? Is now returning as a question. How much should it cost and who should pay? Is a question that we're all talking about, and especially around campaign time. Let's see. We'll talk a little bit about access for a moment, but essentially, when we're talking about higher education and we're talking about who should fund it or how it should be funded, we're really talking about how do we give an economic ladder to those who don't yet have it, or how do we maintain a certain lifestyle and certain income level for a family over time. And so our job as college administrators, as financial aid administrators, is to figure out how we should use this with using different types of funding sources. And so when you get a financial aid package from a school or college, you might say to yourself, this is not reasonable for me or for my family. There's no way that we could pay, $10,000 or $12,000 a year. I didn't get any financial aid is a thing we hear often, even after the award letter is sent. You say, well, really? Did you not get anything? Well, I just got loan offers. That's what we hear sometimes. That is a form of financial aid, and based on the resources is what institutions can do. It is something that we struggle with all the time about how we help. And there are lots of ways that we access donors, for example, at UW-Madison and other institutions to help us out with that cost. But there are other things that we have to consider. A lot of you might say, well, my student is the top of their class. They have a 4.0. They do everything. They cheerlead. They also play on the basketball team. They do whatever else they can do in the community. I believe that student should receive X, what we call merit-based aid. Then you might say, my student is the best performer on the band or on the football team, talent-based aid. And then you have students who, for whatever reason, economically cannot afford it, and you say need-based aid. It's what we need. We use these terms, unfortunately, especially in public spheres, we use them as mutually exclusive terms. So some people will say, I only want to support need-based aid, or I only want to support merit-based aid, or I'm really focused on talent-based aid because I really want to support the band or the football team. As a financial aid administrator, we're less concerned with that because we know that these are not mutually exclusive categories. A student can be very meritorious and have high need. A student with talent can have lots of merit associated with their talents in the classroom as opposed to outside of the classroom. So one of the things that we impress upon people is to not break these down into silos about who students are. Are they just a needy student? Or are they a really smart or a meritorious student? Or are they an athlete or a member of a band? We talk about access and how we get there. Sorry. Speaking of how we get there, you can look at the income distribution for families. So this is what a university would typically look at to see how they will fund their students. So this is UW-Madison over the last year, and this only applies to those students who submitted a FAFSA. So any students who didn't submit the FAFSA, of course, we don't have their family financial data. But you can see it's broken up almost evenly between categories. So about 18% are coming from households with 0 to about 39,999 in income, and then on down the ladder. So 18, 21, 23, 19, and 20% being at 160 and above. So that's sometimes very difficult to say, how should we do this? If you look at it at a pure mathematical scale, you'll say, well, you just start from the bottom and work your way up. But again, as a parent or as a grandparent or a friend of a student, you say, well, I'm actually in the 120 range and I know I still can't afford it. And so we have to have those conversations as well. The university is working really hard to expand our access. The lowest category you saw on that was the 18%, that's the 0 to 39,000. And so what we have is what we call a Go Forward Pell Plan. So there are members of our team here who work a lot in making sure that we can get students from the lowest quartile of income earners within the state of Wisconsin and elsewhere as well. And so recruitment, engagement, and advancement are a big part of that. Some of you who take the bus might have seen the ad for the FAFSA. So if you know people who need to file, who are planning to go to college or return to college next year, please have them file. It was available October 1st. They still have an opportunity, but this is a partnership between Madison College, UW-Madison, Hertzing, and Edgewood. So if you go to the site, we have some materials available. No matter where you are, you can send your students there. It doesn't matter which one of our sites you visit. If you're a Madison College student, you don't have to go to Madison College. You can come to UW-Madison to file. If you're not a student yet, you can go to any one of our sites and file. Very capable people at all of the locations available to help students, their families, their loved ones, their supporters. If we can have Greg raise his hand for just a moment. Greg Offerman is our Associate Director for Advising and Outreach. One of the things that we're doing as well is making sure that we can reach students all throughout the state. So the red dots represent where we are making contacts all throughout the state of Wisconsin. This is Greg's work over the last couple of months to tell them about access at UW-Madison. So we're not just focused, of course, on Dane County or Milwaukee. We're focused all throughout the state because this is something we're really committed to doing. How many people have heard of Bucky's Tuition Promise? Ah, wow. So I don't need to talk about Bucky's Tuition Promise. Good. So if your family's income is at or below $56,000, that's the adjusted gross income, not the gross income, then you can attend UW-Madison as a new student, 4 years, we pay the tuition and fees. If you're a transfer student, 2 years, we pay the tuition and fees. If you're a Madison College Scholar of Promise, you can come to UW-Madison directly after. We'll pay the tuition and fees for the 2 years. And that is something that's really important to us. Unlike some of the other Promise programs you might have heard about, I'll pick on Michigan and I'll pick on Illinois, not because we're competing with them necessarily, because there's nothing better than a Badger. One of the things about our Promise program is that we do not consider assets, and we don't consider assets for a very important reason. We're in an agrarian state for the most part, and if we counted, for example, the value of a combine or acreage for a farm that's underwater, we know that the assets wouldn't really be an accurate reflection of what the family can afford to go to school. So we're one of the only Promise programs that does not count assets. And you can see the results of Bucky's tuition promise in its first year. These dots represent students from all over the state of Wisconsin. We're missing some counties, Iron County, Vilas County. If you know people, not Vilas County, sorry, Iron County, and there's one other county that we're missing, Florence County. If you know people in Iron or Florence, please tell them to come to UW-Madison. If they're under 56,000, you know what else to tell them. And for returning adults, we have a program as well, Badger Ready. And so the Badger Ready program is for adults 25 or older, or if you're a veteran at any age, you can come back to UW-Madison. You can receive your degree. We can make sure that you're admitted and try to fund you as best we can. But I know that we have some more questions. We'll have some materials after. This is how we measure success. Our freshman resident, so that's Wisconsin resident, we admit about 72% of our applicants. That's really big for us. We retain about 95% of all freshmen, resident or non-resident. That's really good, right? And for a very large public institution, that's a really big thing. This year we had 6,862 students in our freshman class come in, and we plan to retain more than 95% of them. Our average time to degree, 4 years, about 3 weeks. It's an average. Don't ask how we calculate that. And over half of our students graduate without having any debt at UW-Madison. We're really proud of that. The debt that the students do have who borrow is below both our state and national averages at $27,000. And so we're really proud of those things, the way we measure success. But how we really want to measure our success is by what our students have to say about their experience at UW-Madison, because that's what really matters most. You can see Virginia, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was like, I don't have to feel like a financial burden to my family if I go to college. Very, very real story. From Pamiri, as a first-generation student, I'm incredibly thankful to be able to attend such a prestigious university. These past years and the people I've met will have a lasting impression, and I will carry the Wisconsin and Badger pride throughout my life and throughout my career. This is the work we do. This is why we do it. This is why we're here. No matter what you hear in the media and the press about these sort of scandalous prices and things like that, there are people who are dedicated at each institution, not just UW-Madison, but at each institution to make it as affordable as possible. Again, it will depend on the resources, but there are things that we can do. I know that some people like for financial aid folks to talk very particularly about what they should be doing to save and how they should plan for college. It is incredibly individualized. Those of you who work in the financial sector know that talking to someone about their finances in a general way only means that as I try to leave the door, 12 people will line up and ask about their particular situation and what they should do. And they'll say, well, I only, my kid needs to go to UW-Madison, but, my husband just did this and I just did that, and how should we do it? So we steered away from that in the interest of time because we know that there might be individual questions, but we brought a team with us to answer them. So John, Greg, Lo, all raise your hands. Don't ask them anything because Kimani is here. And he's available to everyone. No, but we have a team of professionals here to answer specific questions if you have them as you leave, whether it's about you, a neighbor, a friend, a child, a grandkid, if it's about how to repay the loans you borrowed for your kids who are now graduating, living elsewhere, and still expecting that you pay their loans. If it's about your own loans and you're thinking about consolidating, we stand ready and available to assist. We can do so in our office. You don't have to be a UW-Madison student to visit our office. If you're a parent and you're going through the college selection process, or you will be soon, and you need us to review award letters, even if one of those award letters are not from UW-Madison, our team stands ready to assist you. We can look over them, help you suss everything out, talk to you. So Greg and his team are available to all of you, and we stand ready to help as UW-Madison and as financial aid professionals together. Thank you very much. Question?
Yes, could you comment on NYU Medical School plan?
Yes. So for those, the question was, can I comment on NYU Medical School plan? And that's their plan to fund essentially every student who's admitted. My only comment is they can afford it. So maybe they should. That's my only comment. That really is my only comment. Eric, over here, Mary. Oh, sorry.
Hello, thank you very much for presenting today. Education was always considered to be a private good, or that is, it is now considered to be a private good. It was a public good for as long as I can remember, and obviously state and federal support has been eroding. Would you comment on whether you think that's going to change back to it's being a public good?
I think there's a lot of work for us to convince the public that it is a public good again. There's lots of noise. The articles you saw presented create a lot of confusion, especially the one that you saw, college just may not be worth it anymore. We're talking to students who in high school now perceive and interact with the world in a very different way. Brick and mortar institutions might not be their only option, or they might be not the only option that they look for. And so we'll have to find different ways to talk about it. It is definitely a public good, but we'll have to be very creative about how we convince the public overall that it's a public good and it's a great investment and there's a return on investment. I think there's some good ideas about how to do that. I think it's going to take some candidates politically to do something about that as well, some legislators. But really, I think there has to be a groundswelling of the conversation in a way that is open and honest about what education does for students, for their families, for generations. And I thank you for that question. It's a very good one.
Thank you, and thanks for joining our wonderful university here and for your great work, Derek. Appreciate it. So briefly, my perspective is, as a first-generation college student, grandchild of immigrants, had to leave a pricey private college in South Bend, Indiana after 3 years because it was too expensive. It was pushing up against $5,000 then. It's now $75,000 a year to go to a state university med school in New York, which was cheaper. And my immigrant grandparents always said education was the cycle breaker of poverty. It also, I believe, is access to quality education at all ages can address some of our societal challenges in a very meaningful way for generations to come. With that said, the thing that stupefies me here, which has to do with financial aid, is, so I'm not thrilled with the state support decreasing, but it seems like that's the way things are going all around the country, right? So if I have to accept that, how can the legislature impose a tuition freeze on us? You know, one of the ideas that was proposed over the last several years was to raise the list price, which is still a bargain for UW-Madison, for example, and for our other campuses around the state, raise the list price, both in-state and out-of-state, charge the people who can pay more, and then use that to fund scholarships for the people who otherwise don't have a chance. I just don't understand it. And I know you can't talk about political stuff, but I just think, you know, the state tuition freeze, how can they even do it? It's stupid. They're trying to ruin the #1 asset of the state of Wisconsin, the UW system. So that's my question.
Are you running for office?
Thank you.
Oh. I was waiting for an answer, but I guess it really wasn't a question. Hi, I'm Karen Kendrick-Hans, and I will try to ask you a question. Notwithstanding all the good work you have done and your predecessors, there is, I understand, a groaning burden cumulatively of student debt in this country. I know people who are being held back by their student debt from doing many things that would actually grow the economy and create jobs. The next time we're looking for an economic stimulus, why not declare a jubilee year for student debt and empower the educated people to get out from under that debt burden?
Oh, I totally support that. I think that would help a lot of people. I mean, there are many other factors, of course, that go into it. So I'm oversimplifying both the question behind the question and the answer. But I appreciate the idea. Thanks. Yes, sir.
My wife and I are looking for ways to support the UW, and this club does a remarkable job of giving scholarships to people who need it. Now, with this $56,000 a year promise, do you still need assistance, or do students still need assistance?
Of course, I think you know what the answer to that is. But we do need support. As we know that the economic situation in Wisconsin and the families who will be graduating from college, or excuse me, from high school over the next several years, the number of those students will increase, and we'll need to continue our support of students and their families in perpetuity for this program. There may be a time in the near future where we'll need to raise that 56. The 56,000 was the median income, an average of a 5-year median income that we did. And we know that the median income will change over time. So yes, we do need, of course, always support. We have wonderful people from the Wisconsin Foundation Alumni Association all around the room. So Rich Leffler, we'll be sure to connect. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm wondering, what is the key to getting a student through in 4 years?
Oh, wow. Besides sending them to UW-Madison, or nah? I think the key for a student to get in and through in 4 years is making sure that they take advantage of summer opportunities to earn credits. I think in high school, AP, IB, or dual enrollment courses are incredibly helpful. Even sometimes that summer before the first year, earning some credits at the local community college or technical college are sometimes very helpful. And so I think that 4-year, it's going to be there. I would give some suggestions that I know people like to hear, like, well, they need to choose a major and stick to it. But that's just not how we work. I mean, there are all kinds of majors that we have that people don't know. There's no financial aid major. So there's nothing I could have done to sort of plan my career beforehand, and you just sort of weave in and out. My predecessor actually had a degree in soil science, and our first director had his degree in communication. So I think students will find their way, but making sure that they have as many credits under their belt at as many intervals in between the fall and the spring helps them get through 4 years.
Derek, could you talk about the misperception there is with families that do have a higher income? I work in the financial services industries, and I've had people say, oh, we make too much money to qualify for financial aid, but I always encourage them to fill out the FAFSA, because I've heard that if something were to happen or change in the household, you have to be in the system. Could you talk about that and why it's beneficial to get in the system for FAFSA?
First, I just need to thank you, Sandy, because that is the message we like to hear. Everyone should file a FAFSA, even those who, again, believe that their income might be too high. There's no penalty for filing it. You don't have to use the aid that's offered if you don't want it. It just sits there. It's fine to just file the FAFSA. Filing the FAFSA also helps us in emergency needs. I'll give an example. At my former institution, Hurricane Katrina hit very unexpectedly right before classes began. And there were many students and their families who believed they didn't need to complete the FAFSA. They already had a financial plan set. And of course, with everything that happened with Hurricane Katrina, not only did they not prepare financially for that, because there isn't a way to prepare for it, in addition, they didn't have access to a lot of the documents they needed in order to complete the FAFSA at that time. And so that left students in a lurch. Luckily, we were able to help those students and families, but those types of disasters can happen at any time. So not just weather-related that affect many people, but personal things in a home. We have people who, unfortunately, their parents become terminally ill, sick, or die, that they have a sibling who has a medical emergency or some other emergency. And so having the FAFSA on file really helps our team immediately go through and process and sometimes reevaluate the aid package once there's a change in the family income that wasn't reflected in the tax documents from the previous years.
Hi, I'm Amy Gilman, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your team is counseling students regarding the student loan forgiveness program, because I will just share, I was one of the 99.9% of people who've been rejected from, I don't know who those 96 people are and what they've been doing out there in the student loan forgiveness world, but it seems that I know that there were many people when it was announced who made some life decisions and are probably making life decisions now based on the idea that they would be able to go into a lower paying sector potentially and qualify for student loan forgiveness. So how are you handling that in your office?
I can tell you it's a difficult thing to handle. There are so many nuances with the public service loan forgiveness, even as it is right now, and there are many changes planned. There was some proposed legislation over the summer that would eliminate the program altogether, that was calling it the calling the program too expensive, even though later it was revealed only 96 people were actually approved. Some of the benefit from the program might be lost on a student who is a recent graduate. And I'll give you an example. For the public service loan forgiveness, you can't enter forbearance or deferment unless you want to restart your clock. And so if you're a student, let's say, who's graduating from law school or just graduating from undergrad and you plan on being a teacher and you're 24 years old and 5 years later you need to go in a deferment for a very good reason and it starts your clock over, it's a different conversation because essentially you're entering into a standard repayment plan and you're not giving yourself the option of forbearance or deferment unless you want the clock to restart. It's difficult to tell people they should opt for the program, knowing that there might be any number of things that happen. We're working on ways to better communicate with students about why or when they should choose the public service loan forgiveness option instead of, let's say, for example, a graduated repayment or income-based repayment plan, which are some that we would probably prefer over that because over time, you still give yourself an option for deferment and forbearance, which people use a lot. For those who are going through the program now and submitting their applications, we have a team of student loan service professionals who can walk and guide them through that entire process. We do that for both UW-Madison and for UW-Green Bay. Thanks. Yes.
Hi, Derek. I'm Matt. What would you say to a parent who has been saving, sacrificing, wants and needs over years for EdVest or tomorrow's, so hypothetically, of course. What would you say to that parent who has been saving and feels like, maybe that actually hurts that parent? How does that affect chances for other financial aid? Or should that hypothetical parent just go out and buy a new car or maybe a new road bike, full electronic shifting, carbon componentry? Hypothetically speaking, of course.
For that hypothetical parent, they could split the difference. They could take a trip somewhere on a dirt bike. But if they just make it, let's say, in Dane County, and they use someone else's dirt bike, they might get away with still saving for college. No, I think for parents who are saving in EdVest, there are some things that have to be considered. So 529 plans, for example, are something that were really big at a time. It's difficult to advise families to use 529 plans wholesale, as we used to just say everyone should, if you can, get into a 529 plan. And there are a number of reasons. 529 plans typically just cover tuition and fee costs. It's hard to ship those costs around in some plans, and it might not be as beneficial at the long run. You could probably earn same or similar types of things had you invested, not necessarily spent it on the motorbike or whatever else. But I think it takes an individualized look at the family's financial situation and what that financial situation might be over time. To answer the question quite honestly, I want to make sure I stay to the four-way test and not just give a generic solution to the hypothetical parent, of course. All right.
Okay, one last question. Teresa?
This question, I think, is for the gentleman right there. So my question is with regards to the community outreach that you're making in some of the counties or areas of the state that have been a bit more receptive than others, especially areas of like where you have like segments of color, and then what reasons have you had for like why you've had more success in some versus those that you have not?
Greg?
Oh, you want to take it? I would say most of the spaces we've been have been we've been very successful there, and it really leads to more opportunities. As we get out and about, I think people are very welcoming, and they just want us to be in those spaces and help those families navigate the financial aid process. So one opportunity leads to three more, and before you know it, our October's busy, and we've been in 36 places in 31 days. So we really enjoy that.
And I think part of that is sort of building the trust in community spaces, and that takes some time and that takes footwork. It's not just sending a glossy brochure or having a phone conversation or a one visit. And so we know that there are sometimes we need to embed ourselves within communities, whether they be rural communities, communities of color, faith-based communities, all different types of communities. And I think what our team has focused on and what Greg's leadership has done for our advising and outreach is we've taken the processing out of those team members and focused them completely outwardly so that their entire time is really dedicated to serving students, families, and communities directly without being tied to a desk. So we know that they're working if we don't see them in the office, essentially.
Thank you once again, Derek.
And thank you again for the scholarship support.
It's great.
As noted, Derek and his office will be up here if you guys have further questions. Otherwise, we are adjourned.